Alright, welcome back everyone. First and foremost, I do apologize. I know it has been a long time since I've posted up a video. And I also want to take a quick moment and thank all of you that reached out to me during this absence and asked me if I was doing okay. I really do appreciate that sentiment. I'm perfectly fine. I'm just a little bit busy with other areas of my life, being work and family right now. So these videos will continue to be very sparse, and I do apologize, and I do appreciate all of the support that all of you have shown. I wish I could keep up a schedule that was greater than what I'm able to, but I'm just simply not able to do it all the time. So if you want to continue subscribing and clicking for alerts, please do so down below. If not, I completely understand. I have a lot of editing to do for video footage that I already have too. So I'm going to try and get to those things. Again, thank you to all of you that have reached out via social media and asked me how I'm doing. I really do appreciate that, as well as all the support and the continued subscriptions that continue to come in. So thank you all for all of that. Now that I'm back, I want to talk today about a lot of things, so I apologize in advance. This is probably going to bounce around topics a little bit, but I'm going to try and catch you all up on what has happened in the absence. Obviously, I am on the 790 Adventure R. I still have this bike. However, I have since decided that the 1090 would go. It has been sold, and luckily it sold to a good friend of mine. I was able to give him a good deal on a fantastic bike, and he's enjoying it. With that out of the way, let's talk about the reasons why. Since I've gotten the 790 Adventure R, obviously I've been riding it more, and since I've gotten it, I think I only rode the 1090 one time. I still stand by that the 1090 is an absolutely amazing bike. When I purchased it though, I knew the 790 was what I wanted. It just wasn't available yet, and I didn't feel like waiting for that to come out given my Colorado trip, so I went ahead and I bought the 1090, anticipating that when the 790 came out, I would probably want one, and that I would probably end up liking it better for my usages than the 1090. So, let's talk a little bit about what I like better and what some of the comparisons are between the 1090 and the 790. The 1090 definitely feels more stable at highway speeds, so let's start right there. If you are the type of rider that you're going to be doing more long-distance touring, you are definitely going to want to go down the path of the 1090 or stick with the 1090 if you already have one. The extra weight of that bike actually helps you in situations where you're doing high speeds on the freeways and where you have high crosswinds and things like that. The 790 does just fine, but there is definitely a difference, and if that's your predominant area for riding, stick with the 1090. Definitely get the cruise control added because absolutely nothing beats electronic cruise control. However, the 790 really excels exactly where and I think most others expected it to, and that is in the off-road conditions. For those of you that have watched the channel for a while, you'll know that I often like to do solo trips. I know not many people do like it. Most people like to ride in groups, and I do like that too. However, the solitude that I get and the ability to go at my pace on my schedule, make my stops where I want, I really like that sometimes, and I do enjoy going solo, which to me is where this 790 really excels. The 1090 was a phenomenal off-road bike for its size, but you do have to caveat that with for its size. It rode much smaller than it was, but if you're solo and you go over an obstacle and you don't make it and you're having to pick the bike up repeatedly, which yes, I could do by myself, it still takes a lot out of you. My most recent trip here on the 790 was a shorter trip, but included a lot of B and C level roads. We've had some pretty bad storms coming through, and so those roads were in absolutely disastrous conditions. Trees down everywhere, a muddy mess. And after doing that ride, I am so happy that I have the 790 and that I've decided to stick with this as my bike, because when I'm alone, I have absolutely no problem picking it up if I do drop it, and I tend to drop it less because you gain even more confidence with that lower weight of the 790, and it's a little bit easier to go at obstacles with a little more of an attack mode, where the 1090 was fully capable of it. Go watch the videos from Chris Birch and others. It's completely possible, but you have to have that confidence. And for me personally, I just could not get there knowing that bike's weight and size. I could ride it comfortably in most conditions, but if it came to a large log or something like that, I would find it difficult to go ahead and approach that and just assume that I'm going to make it, knowing that it was going to exhaust me if I didn't make it. The 790 is still not a dual sport, so please don't get me wrong. That's not what this bike is. These are adventure bikes, not dual sport bikes. Having said that though, for an adventure bike, this bike's weight is completely manageable and very easy, at least for me, at 5'11" and 165 pounds. I'm not a big guy, but I have absolutely no problem if I do drop this bike picking it up. I have no problem lifting the rear end to get it over an obstacle if I do get stuck and I can't go over it riding. All those things I am able to do and do with confidence by myself. So what that enables me to do is essentially go on these rides solo, which I like to do, and when I see a little offshoot or something that looks interesting to me, I am not afraid to go down that little offshoot even if I'm alone. The 1090, I would be just as confident going down that little offshoot, with one caveat, and that is that I would have to be within a group, because if I dropped the bike repeatedly, it was going to sap my energy picking that heavy thing up. The other big thing though that is adding to the weight difference is, since I've gone to the 790, I have done away with the hard luggage. Part of that is due to I've decided not to take so much camera equipment with me. Sorry guys, the videos will suffer a bit. And instead go with really the Mosko Moto Reckless 80 system. And I'll give you guys some B-roll clips of that, show you what it looks like on the bike. Fits really well. I like it very much, and it works really good for shorter trips and is expandable for longer trips and keeps this bike weighing less than if I had racks and panniers on here. So again, I'm extremely happy with that choice. That's a little bit of why I decided to keep this one and get rid of the 1090. If you guys have other questions or comments about that, please post them down below. From there, let's move on to what's been done to this 790. I have not gone crazy. All I've done is mostly move the stuff that I had from the 1090 over to the 790. So the double take mirrors here, those have been moved over from the 1090. I've talked about these before, I won't go in depth. I just absolutely love them. Glad to have them moved over onto this motorcycle here. The rally foot pegs, the much bigger, broader, wider foot pegs that I purchased for the 1090, those also got moved over to this bike. I'm really happy with those. Once again, just like on the 1090, except even easier because the weight difference is they give you a really good way to give input to the motorcycle while you're standing up, while you're riding off-road, and put that input down low on the large foot pegs where you're not, pushing heavily on the handlebars, which is a very good thing off-road. Let's see, what else have I done? This sw-motech tank bag. Now, this was an area of disappointment with me on the 790. I actually had to let my old tank bag go with the sale of the 1090 because it would not fit on this bike. Given the tank design and what they've done here, there's one and only one tank bag from sw-motech that works with the quick lock system, which you guys again have heard me talk about in the past. I really like that system, but it did cause me to have to go to this really small bag that's on here, and as you can see, there's not a whole lot of room for anything other than small items, sunglasses, whatever that you might want to keep in there. It's still useful, I still like it, I just wish I could have kept the little bit larger one that I already had mounted to the 1090 because I really liked that one. But even so, on this bike, this does work well. It does have to mount backwards, so that's a little bit peculiar because the zippers don't work well if you're riding along and want to try and get in there quickly to get something, because they're turned around the opposite way, and there's a very good chance that wind would get under there and open it all the way up and take things out of your bag. So that's a downside to it, but again, gotta live with the constraints that I have. Moving on from there, the GPS is right up here in my line of sight, and that is once again thanks to sw-motech. They make the mount that goes right on there, and again, attached to their mount is then the Garmin amps mount. Once again, you guys have heard me talk about this in previous videos. I've had it on almost all of my bikes. I absolutely love it. That accommodates the Garmin unit right up here in my line of sight. This mount does have a little bit of vibration to it, but it's completely manageable, and I do like having it in that position. The other things that I've added, and you'll see the duct tape up here, that duct tape is just a cosmetic thing, don't worry. There's little panels that clip in and out of the left-hand side of that dash panel, and I liked the idea of drilling holes in there so that if I ever decide to go back, I can take the duct tape off, use a little bit of Goo Gone, and then basically buy new plastic covers for each side there and get rid of the ram mount that I have on this side, and then I'll try to get you guys a view of it, but the additional 12-volt socket that I have on the opposite side. The 12-volt socket in the middle is the standard one, so no changes there. And then the other thing that I've added is I've gone ahead and tapped into the rear 12-volt sockets they're pre-wired. Just like up front, there are two sets of wires. One is keyed, one is not, and they're a little bit different amperages, so just be sure to use the voltmeter and check those out. But what I did is I ran the GPS off the ignition. The auxiliary 12-volt that I added, I went ahead and made that constant power. The stock one is already keyed off of the ignition, so what that means is I have a 12-volt socket that is wired off of the keyed ignition and another 12-volt socket that is constant live power. Between those two, it is obviously more than enough for my needs. And then the one in the back I tapped into, and that's actually for my heated gear. But then I also have the option to run a 12-volt wire into the tank bag and power something inside of here without having it come across the handlebars. This is the little hot wire pigtail plug, if you can see that there. And basically that goes down underneath the shroud through the seat and uses the two pigtails, again, that came from the manufacturer. I just tied into them. So all of my electronics are plenty powered. I've got more outlets than I could ever need. I've got a spare RAM mount if I should ever need it, and that takes care of all of those aspects. Another change that I made, it's not anything that I've added, but essentially I did move the windscreen into the higher position of the two. I'm still playing around with which causes less buffeting, and the higher the low position. I've seen other people have just removed it altogether. I am still considering that because it does throw off a lot of buffeting, especially on this helmet with the peak. The wind tends to catch it right at the peak, and basically it will cause a lot of constant head shake, so that might even be coming through in the video. One minor complaint there in regards to that windscreen. Another minor complaint, and I'm just living with it, very much similar to the 1090. Apparently KTM really struggles with fuel gauges that work. Mine does not either. Well, I take that back. Mine does work, but it works the way that most people have described it, which is it stays on full most of the time, and then by the time it gets down to 1 bar below full, it moves very rapidly, because apparently where the sensor is mounted in the shape of this tank, it doesn't sense that first half a tank or whatever that it is as it's going down. But I keep an eye on my mileage, and it's plenty okay. I haven't had any issues, and certainly something to live with. So let's talk about issues. There have been a lot reported over the internet, some of which I have encountered, some of which I have not. So what are the ones that I have encountered? Probably the most predominant one that I've experienced, and I think others have as well, is related to the cold starting or the initial start. It's not just cold starting, but it seems to be whenever you start the motorcycle after it hasn't been ridden for a while. It doesn't like to fire and stay running right off the bat. It usually takes me 2, sometimes even 3 times hitting the starter button. It's only about a second. It'll start up and then die, start up and then die. And usually by the 3rd time, it starts up and it runs just fine. I'm hoping that maybe KTM will come out with an ECU update or remap for the fuel injection that will solve that problem. But even if they don't, it's not that big of a deal to me personally, and I can live with it. I'm sure lots of people will flame away on that one. Have at it. The comments are down below. The second issue that I just recently started encountering that others have reported as well is moisture behind the screen. You can't see it right now, and I'll have to keep an eye on it to see if it's going to get any worse or not. But when I did some overnight camping and the dew in the morning, everything like that, there was moisture in the corner behind the glass on the LCD panel. That is something, again, that others have reported. So I'll have to keep an eye on it, and if it needs it, I'll take it in and get it fixed under warranty. But again, at this point in time, I don't have a significant amount of concerns about it. The issues that I have not experienced, at least not yet, is I have not had any oil leak issues, and I also have not had any issues with my gear shifter. I haven't touched it. It's set up the way it was when I took delivery. However, mine does seem to have two of those star washers underneath, so I don't know if that's something that the dealer did during prep and maybe wasn't done on all of them. But overall, those are the only issues that I have personally encountered. With the issues out of the way, let's continue on. Let's get to the good stuff. Why do I absolutely love, and I do mean love, this 790 adventure? We've already talked about the solo aspects and the weight. Sure, that's the common stuff. But it's more than that. This bike handles so well. So many different conditions. Off-road, on-road, riding it more like a sport bike, riding it more like a dirt bike. It just adapts really well. It even does perfectly fine on highway sprints. Now, obviously, it doesn't do as well as the 1090 did, but it does well enough for the highway stints that I tend to do. I typically, on wide open highway sections, don't end up going much over 80 miles an hour. So the, buffeting and things like that, they're manageable things that I can certainly live with and well worth the compromises when you gain the benefits in the other areas. The other thing that at first I didn't like, but I'm absolutely growing to love now, is the manageable throttle response. Other people have reported this. I have it right now, if you can see that, in throttle response rally mode. When I first put it into that mode, it is intimidating. It's very snappy. If you are in a gear and you give it gas and you don't have the traction set to 9 or the max, then you are going to be spinning up that rear wheel like crazy. But once you get used to it, that snappy throttle response is very intoxicating. To me, it was very easy to adjust to after I started riding in it for a little while. The configuration of this motorcycle is just amazing. The on-the-fly switching between the various traction control levels, you can see right now, I'm riding along. I don't have to close the throttle, anything. I can just press the button and choose how much slip I want at the rear wheel. And speaking of that, I'm not the biggest fan of traction control. In fact, I used to ride my 1090 in off-road mode all the time with traction control off and ABS in off-road mode. Took a lot of flack for it. I just liked it. However, I will say that on the 790, this system is so good that I do use it in some scenarios by setting it higher. So the scenarios that I use it, cranking it up to 9, which is where I left it at here, I use that in really muddy conditions when I'm not climbing hills. The reason why I use it is because it does an absolutely impressive job of managing the rear wheel slippage in muddy conditions to where the bike doesn't do anything unexpected. For anybody who's ridden a lot of mud or anything like that, you know that in mud you can get crossed up sideways on occasion, and it's not always a fun experience because if there's ruts, you can get cross-rutted. It can just be a bear. Not to mention, maintaining forward momentum in mud is very important. This traction control in absolute slippy, muddy conditions works really well. The previous time I rode mud, I wasn't relying on it. And since I tried using it, it is actually very impressive. So for those of you that haven't done it, be sure to put it in that mode. I was skeptical myself too, but the traction control really, really does work well in specific scenarios. And again, the thing that I personally like about it the most is that you can change that on the fly. Going back to the throttle response, you can also change that on the fly, although it does require closing throttle, but you do not have to come to a stop. With all of that being said, I have not taken this bike out of rally mode since going into it shortly after the purchase, and after getting used to rally throttle response, I've been leaving it in that throttle response mode for quite some time. It is very, very snappy. As you can see there, it accelerates like no tomorrow. So the reports that people have of this bike being slow or underpowered, I'm telling you, you've got to make sure you ride it with that rally throttle response and in rally mode, and then set the traction control to a comfortable level to where you can control that wheel spin but get enough of it to make the bike do what you want it to do. And if you do that, this thing has way more than enough power. I just don't know how people can say that they need more than this. If you do, fine, get a 1090, get a 1290, go get something with, 125, 130, 150 horsepower, but for me personally, I just don't need any more than this. This puts a huge smile on my face. It pulls hard throughout the corners. It just performs phenomenally well everywhere. Now, on to one other reason why I love this, and one thing I forgot to talk about that I added. I did get my handlebar switch in there, and I want to take a brief moment to thank the guys over at Woodstock KTM. Nate and the guys over there really, really helped me out because they were backlogged when my handlebar switch came in, and it was a little bit of a pain to try and get coordinated a time where their guys could install the switch and do the programming. So they worked with me and they allowed me to go ahead and pick the switch up, do the install of the switch myself, and then bring it back into them for the programming, which allowed me to get the whole job done sooner. So I just can't thank those guys enough. They've been great. I've purchased multiple bikes through them, and just that type of service is not very common in this day and age. So huge shout out to them, huge thanks to them. It was a big win for me. And the electronic cruise control, I had it on my 1090. It was added from a company in Australia. It was an aftermarket solution. This one is right from KTM. It's the handlebar switch and then programming in the computer. The combination of those two, it is exactly what they say it is. Handlebar, turn your cruise on, set it, 1 mile an hour increments, both up and down. It's very, very easy to use. Now there is one minor complaint that I have with the cruise control, and that is if the bike thinks it needs to intervene with traction control, it will turn the cruise control off. So if I'm cruising along at 55, 60 miles an hour here, and I set the cruise control, and I hit a bump that's big enough, which there are some potholes around here that are big enough to set off the traction control on the motorcycle, again, depending on my slip angle and everything else. But in certain situations, that will happen. And when it does happen, basically what it will do is it will be as if you tapped the brake. Your cruise control will stop, and it can catch you off guard if your hand's not on the handlebar. So certainly something to be aware of. It doesn't happen frequently, but it can and it does happen. Part of that ties into, I think, how stiff the suspension is. I've mentioned it before. I've softened it up a little bit. I think I might continue to soften it up even more for my weight. I think they set it up very, very firm from the manufacturer or from the dealer or some combination of the two. But I think it could stand to be a little bit softer yet. I know this video is really, really long, but again, I'm just trying to get you guys all caught up with where I am with this bike, how happy I am with it. I can't say enough good things. For all the people that are naysayers, you don't have to like this bike, but you do need to pay respect to KTM for listening to the market. The market said when the 1190 and the 1090 and the 1290, when all these other bikes were coming out, the market kept talking about the 950s and the 990s and how much they loved them, and KTM listened, and that will be my closing thought on this bike. I've ridden the 950s, I've ridden the 990s. If you guys haven't seen it, be sure to check out those videos. I've loved those bikes, even after riding my 1090. Great, great bikes. And the big question for most people that have ridden the 950 and the 990s is the 790 a modern 950 and 990. And having ridden all of those bikes, personally, I would say yes. It is every bit as good as a 950 or a 990, probably more along the lines of a 990 because of the fuel injection, but yet even better. It's just obviously more advanced. It has the cornering ABS, which also works really, really well, by the way. Again, it's variable depending on your setting on the slip angle, so it can intervene early or late depending on what your preference is. But they've listened. They've come out with the bike that KTM owners have said that they wanted. And if you look at this in comparison, and I know I'm going to take a lot of flack for this one, go ahead and light up that comment section. If you compare this to a KLR 650, a DRZ, a Honda, I can't even remember, XR or whatever it is, 650, any of those types of bigger dual sport bikes. I'm not talking about the KTM 350s. I'm not talking about, lighter weight, smaller machines with headlights and plates. I'm talking about the bigger dual sports. If you compare this bike to those, it's just night and day. The suspension is so much better. The electronics are so much better. The power is so much more. The braking is so much better. I mean, every single aspect of this bike is hands down better than any of those bigger dual sports. So personally, I can't say enough good things. I really, really am pleased and happy with the bike. I'm so glad that KTM responded and brought this thing to market, and I'm glad that I have one, although I am considering, depending on availability and pricing, stepping up once again from this version to the KTM 790 Adventure Rally Edition, but that is a limited edition, and I don't know how much they're going to be yet, and I don't know if I can even get one. If it's an option, I might do it. This one's pretty well set up, so I don't think it's likely, but stay tuned. If I do get one, I'll be sure to let you guys know. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, I know it's really long, and I do apologize for that, but there's been a great big gap, and I wanted to get all of you caught up. Hopefully you liked the vlog format. If so, be sure to give this video a great big thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe, click that bell for notifications, and be sure to share this on social media. And again, thank you to all of you who have commented and reached out to me and subscribed. I really, really appreciate that. So until next time, and I don't know how long that might be, take care and ride safe.